An original podcast from podlatino.com.
Every generation has its own noise. Ours comes, in large part, from screens. They're in our pockets, on the table, in bed with us. We check them before we fall asleep, and they're the first thing we reach for in the morning. This isn't a criticism or a condemnation. It's simply a description of the environment we live in, and most of us move through it without stopping to ask where it's actually taking us. But every once in a while, someone appears who lives in that exact same environment and uses it differently. They don't escape from it. They don't condemn it from the outside or reject it with grand gestures. They live inside it, but they point it somewhere. Carlo Acutis was one of those people, and he was 15 years old when he died. He was born in London in 1991, into an Italian family of comfortable means. He grew up in Milan, in a modern apartment, with parents who led a fairly ordinary secular life for the time. It wasn't a household of devout practitioners or religious professionals. It was a family, with a television, with work schedules, with the digital world creeping steadily into the center of everything. Carlo grew up in that world and was fully part of it, without any apparent tension. He loved computers from an early age, with an intensity that wasn't obsession, but genuine, sustained curiosity. He taught himself to program, exploring systems, interfaces, and languages on his own. He understood the logic of the internet in ways that many adults around him never quite grasped. In that sense, he was completely a child of his time. And at the same time, from a young age, something in him was reaching in another direction. Not dramatically, and not under the weight of some kind of crisis. It was a quiet, almost constant pull toward something that filled him in a way no screen could fully replace. That something was the Eucharist. For those unfamiliar with Catholicism, the Eucharist is the center of Catholic worship. The belief that during Mass, bread and wine become the body and blood of Christ. It's not simply a rite or a ceremony. For Catholics, it's a real encounter, a concrete presence. Carlo understood it that way from a very young age, with a depth that surprised the people around him. He started going to Mass every day. Not because anyone required it of him, not because it was a family obligation, because he wanted to go. Because in that space he found something the rest of his day simply didn't give him. That already tells you something. A teenager who decides, out of his own conviction and without any external pressure, to organize his day around daily Mass, in a culture where Mass is nowhere near the center of young people's social lives, is making a decision that goes against the current. Not loudly, not performatively, just quietly, through his schedule. Carlo didn't go to Mass to be seen or to meet someone else's expectations. He went because that practice carried real weight for him, a presence he described as the anchor of his day. And that conviction didn't make him strange or push him away from his peers. He was still a kid who played soccer, who had a sense of humor, who connected with people easily and without any air of spiritual superiority. His classmates remember him as warm, direct, and unpretentious. He didn't preach, he just lived. That life also included a genuine attentiveness to people who were on the margins. Near his neighborhood in Milan, there were people living on the streets. Carlo knew them by name. He brought them food with a consistency that had nothing to do with public campaigns or social media posts. It was a quiet habit, the habit of someone who keeps their eyes open and decides to actually do something with what they see. That kind of sustained, low-profile charity is hard to maintain for anyone, and especially for a teenager whose environment is constantly pushing him toward visible achievement, toward accumulating likes, toward the approval of his peers. Carlo moved in a different direction without making a statement about it. What he did because he believed it was simply the right thing to do, not because he was expecting recognition. He also had a deliberate relationship with technology itself. He enjoyed video games, but he set limits on them, not because he thought they were inherently bad, but because he had figured out, in a way most teenagers never do, that time is finite and that not every use of time is equal. He had decided how much space entertainment was going to occupy in his life, and how much he was going to hold back for other things. That kind of internal discipline, without rigidity or performance, is striking in anyone. It wasn't coming from an imposed rule. It was coming from a set of values Carlo had built from the inside out. But perhaps what makes his story most distinctive, what connects it most powerfully to the world we live in now, is what he chose to do with his technological skills when he put them in service of something larger than himself. Driven by his deep love for the Eucharist, Carlo discovered that across different countries and different centuries, there were documented accounts of what the Catholic tradition calls Eucharistic miracles. Cases in which, according to that tradition, and in some instances according to scientific analysis, the consecrated bread had undergone physical transformations that couldn't be explained naturally. Carlo decided to document all of them. He spent hours researching, classifying, and organizing. He built a detailed digital exhibition, carefully structured, pulling together cases from different countries and different eras, with sources, images, and thorough descriptions. He didn't do it to prove he was the most devout kid in his class. He did it because he believed that information could help other people understand something that was central to him. That faith has a history. It has evidence. It has a concrete weight that invites you to take it seriously. That exhibition began to travel. It was displayed in parishes, cathedrals, and Catholic gathering spaces across multiple continents. It reached places Carlo never set foot in. And it kept reaching them after his death, because Carlo never got to see the full extent of what he had built. In 2006, when he was 15, he was diagnosed with leukemia. The disease moved fast. Within weeks, a boy who had been fully active, present, and engaged with his everyday life was lying in a hospital bed, facing something medicine couldn't fix. The diagnosis didn't find him without inner resources. It found him with a life already ordered, with a direction already in place. There was nothing urgent to rearrange inside himself, because the arrangement was already there. The people who were with him during those days speak of a calm that wasn't resignation or denial. It was something different, a kind of clarity. Carlo didn't pretend the illness wasn't weighing on him, but he also didn't experience it as a catastrophe that crushed everything or as an injustice that erased the meaning of everything before it. There was a coherence in him that came from a long way back. He had built, year by year, a life oriented toward something that didn't depend on his health or on how much time he had left. And when that time suddenly ran short, the orientation didn't disappear. It became more visible. He died in October of 2006. He was 15 years old. His parents asked that he be buried in Assisi, the central Italian city bound inseparably to St. Francis of Assisi, one of the saints who had most shaped Carlo's spiritual life. Assisi is an ancient pilgrimage site, a place where the history of faith has physical weight in every stone and every street. The fact that Carlo rests there isn't decorative detail. It's coherent with who he was and what he loved. Over time, his tomb became a destination for pilgrims from around the world, especially young people. People who had heard his story and felt that it was speaking to something close to them, something recognizable, something that touched questions they were already asking themselves. In September of 2025, Pope Leo XIV canonized him. Carlo Acutis became the first millennial saint officially recognized by the Catholic Church. A teenager born in 1991, raised among computers and broadband connections, declared a saint by the same institution that has spent 2,000 years telling the stories of people who chose to live differently. That canonization isn't just an institutional act. It's a statement about what counts as holiness in the 21st century. Not only the grand historical gestures, not only martyrs or founders of medieval religious orders, also a short, modern, ordinary life, lived with clarity of purpose. Carlo's story doesn't offer a recipe or a step-by-step model to copy. It offers a question that each person has to answer from their own place. What are you doing with the time and the tools you have? A screen can become a mirror of vanity, a machine for anxiety, or simply a corridor with no exit where the day disappears without leaving anything behind. It can also be a way to say something true, to build something that outlasts a 24-hour story, to bring other people closer to something worth caring about. Carlo didn't reject technology or turn it into an enemy. He used it with an intention that turned it into something else. And that difference, small as it looks on the surface, is ultimately the difference between a life that passes and a life that leaves a mark.